If you've ever looked at a woman who chooses to be alone and thought something must be wrong, listen closely, because the truth is going to challenge everything you've been taught in the first 8 seconds. Some women aren't alone because they're unloved, they're alone because they finally stopped abandoning themselves. So let me ask you a question that cuts through the noise. Why would a woman stay single without chasing, without searching, without settling, when she could easily be in a relationship? Most people rush to the obvious answers. She's lonely, she's picky, she got hurt, but those are convenient stories, and convenience is what the world uses to avoid deeper truths. Because here's what no one wants to admit. Sometimes she's not single because she lacks options. She's single because she has standards. Standards built from experience, from self-respect, and from a quiet kind of courage. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's not hiding from love. She's simply done trading her peace for temporary attention. In Stoicism, there's a simple principle. You don't control what happens to you, but you do control what you accept. And for a long time, many people accept love like it's a bargain bin deal. This is close enough. This is better than being alone. At least someone chose me. But a woman who has awakened, really awakened, stops negotiating with her dignity. She learns the Stoic art of inner freedom. She becomes independent of what she cannot command. Approval, validation, someone else's commitment. And that's exactly why her silence makes people uncomfortable. Because her solitude isn't empty. It isn't a punishment. It's a sanctuary. It's a private room where she stopped performing and started listening. Listening to her mind, her boundaries, her instincts, her body. She realized something most people never have the patience to learn. Peace is not found in the arms of the right person, it's built inside the right self. Now, this is where Carl Jung becomes important. Jung said that what we refuse to face within ourselves doesn't disappear, it shows up as projection. In other words, people don't always see her clearly. They see their own fears reflected in her. A woman who doesn't chase love becomes a mirror. She reflects the collective shadow, the dependency we call romance, the insecurity we call needing someone, the emptiness we try to cover with constant companionship. So when people label her cold, distant, or arrogant, it's often not a description of her. It's a confession about them. Because a woman who is whole without a relationship breaks a silent contract society depends on. The contract that says a woman's value increases only when someone chooses her. If she doesn't need to be chosen to feel worthy, then control loses its leverage. Manipulation loses its hook. Even the polite pressure, don't be too picky, give him a chance, nobody's perfect, starts sounding like what it really is. A request for her to shrink. And she refuses. Not loudly, not with bitterness, but with calm. The kind of calm Stoics admired. The calm of a person who knows the difference between what is essential and what is noise. Maybe she used to love too hard. Maybe she once gave more than she received. Explained too much. Waited too long. Tried to earn the bare minimum. But at some point she realized a painful truth. You can't build a home inside someone who is committed to staying emotionally homeless. And that realization didn't make her angry. It made her clear. So her life slows down, her choices sharpen, her energy becomes selective. She doesn't say no because she hates people, she says no because she finally loves herself enough to protect the life she's building. And here's the twist. This isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of real love. Because the Stoics never taught us to hate connection, they taught us to stop clinging to it. They taught us that love becomes healthier when it's chosen freely, not chased desperately. Jung called it individuation, becoming yourself instead of becoming what the world demands. So let me leave you with one question that might change how you see being alone forever. What if her quiet isn't loneliness, but evidence of a soul that finally came home? Because when a woman stops begging for a place in someone else's life, she starts building a life that can't be taken from her. And once you understand that, you'll never look at solitude the same way again. And next, we need to talk about the one hidden reason people fear a woman like this, because it reveals what they've been avoiding in themselves. There's a word people use when they see a woman choosing solitude, closed off. But what they don't realize is this fortress isn't built to keep love out. It's built to keep the soul from being invaded again. Because some people don't retreat from the world out of fear, they retreat out of clarity. In Stoicism, there's a quiet discipline Marcus Aurelius practiced daily. Guard the inner citadel. Not because the world is evil, but because the world is loud. It pushes you to compromise, to explain yourself, to overgive just to be liked. And eventually, if you don't protect your inner life, you start living as a version of yourself that exists only to survive other people. That's what her fortress really is. It's not isolation. It's restoration. And this is where Jung adds a sharper edge. What you refuse to face within yourself doesn't disappear. It gets projected onto someone else. That's why so many relationships become confusing. You're not just loving the person in front of you. You're also chasing a wound, trying to rewrite a childhood story, trying to prove you're finally worthy. A lot of people think solitude is emptiness, but for her, solitude became a mirror. At first, it wasn't romantic. It was uncomfortable. Quiet nights, a phone that didn't buzz, memories she used to drown out with attention, old feelings rising like tides, abandonment, insecurity, the fear that if she stops giving, she'll stop being chosen. And here's the moment most people miss. She didn't go inward because the wound was open. She went inward because she was finally ready to let it heal properly. Think about it like this. Some people keep dating the way you keep putting pressure on a bruise, hoping it magically stops hurting. But healing doesn't happen through distraction. Healing happens through honesty. So she sat with herself. She started noticing patterns. The way she would over-explain when she felt someone pulling away. The way she would accept crumbs and call it compromise. The way she confused anxiety with chemistry. The way she tried to earn what should have been given freely, respect. And if you've ever been there, you know what it feels like. It's not just heartbreak. It's humiliation mixed with hope. She remembers being the one who texted first, who apologized first, who forgave first. She remembers shrinking her needs to avoid being too much. She remembers telling herself, at least he's here, as if presence without care was better than being alone. But slowly, disappointment did something powerful. It stopped being pain and started becoming instruction. That's what awakening looks like in real life. Not fireworks, not revenge, just the quiet realization that your soul keeps getting tired for a reason. So no, she didn't give up on love. She gave up on the version of love that required self-erasure. Stoicism would call this wisdom, knowing what is worth your energy and what is not. Epictetus taught that freedom begins the moment you stop handing your peace to things you can't control, someone else's effort, someone else's maturity, someone else's honesty. And once she understood that, her standards changed. Not into perfection, not into fantasy, into something simple, reciprocity, real presence, emotional adulthood. Because she doesn't want to be rescued. She doesn't want someone to complete her. She wants to be seen, fully, without performing, without proving, without begging for attention. That should be natural. And this is the part that scares people. When a woman stops needing to be saved, it forces the world to confront a question it hates. If she can be whole on her own, then what have the rest of us been chasing? Some will admire her, some will misunderstand her, some will call it pride, but it's not pride. It's self-respect with boundaries. Now she isn't trying to fix anyone. She's not auditioning for love. She's not building a relationship out of desperation. She's building a life so full, so grounded, that love is only welcome if it adds, not replaces. She wants a partnership that feels like overflow. Two complete people meeting, not two wounded people negotiating survival. So yes, she lives alone, not because she's broken, because she made a vow. Never again will she betray her own soul just to keep someone close. And once you understand that, the next question becomes unavoidable. What does her presence reveal in the people who can't handle it? Let me hit you with something that stings because it's true. The world calls you too picky when you stop accepting what used to break you. And if that line made you exhale a little, you already know what I mean. There's a difference nobody teaches you early enough. Isolating is running away from life, but preserving is protecting the life you finally built inside yourself. Society loves to confuse the two because it's easier to label a woman single than to admit she's selective. And once you see that, the old story, if she's alone, she must be unhappy, starts sounding like a superstition people repeat so they don't have to face their own fear of being alone. Jung had a brutal way of describing it. When conventions dominate, there's little room for authenticity. Translation? When everyone is performing, anyone who stops performing becomes a problem. Because she's no longer following the script. She's living from her essence, not from approval. So people say the same lines almost like they're reading from a script. Don't be so picky. Just be open. Nobody's perfect. You're going to miss your chance. And she smiles, not a smug smile, a calm one. The kind of smile you give when you've already paid the price of ignoring your intuition and you're not interested in paying it again. Because what they call picky is often just the bare minimum, something she needed decades to understand she deserved. Not luxury, not fantasy, just the basics. Consistency, respect, emotional responsibility, a love that doesn't require self-betrayal. Stoicism would call this discernment. Epictetus said you should be careful about what you attach your peace to. And for a long time, many people attach their peace to someone who's unpredictable, someone who gives attention today and distance tomorrow. That's not romance. That's emotional gambling. So she stops gambling. She doesn't need perfection. She needs maturity. A person who has done their inner work. Someone who can have hard conversations without punishment. Someone who doesn't call boundaries drama. Someone who doesn't confuse control with care. And here's why that makes people uncomfortable. Her happiness is no longer dependent on being chosen. That's a quiet revolution. Because the moment a woman can be content without a relationship, it removes the leverage. It pulls the mask off certain games, love bombing, guilt, silent treatment, breadcrumbing. Those tactics only work on someone who is starving. And she's not starving anymore. Now, watch the contrast in how she moves. She doesn't rush. She doesn't chase. She doesn't try to earn what should be freely offered. She's not looking for sparks. She's looking for depth. She's not addicted to chemistry. She's paying attention to character. And when she says no, it's not punishment. It's truth. A clean no. A respectful no. When she walks away, it's not coldness. It's self-protection. Because she understands something most people learn too late. Staying in the wrong place slowly erases you. And sometimes, choosing a quiet night at home isn't loneliness. It's clarity. It's the mind finally breathing again. It's the nervous system saying, thank you for not forcing us back into chaos. Jung's line hits harder the older you get. Look outward and you dream. Look inward and you awaken. Because outward living is always a performance, always proving, always pleasing, always chasing an image. But inward living, that's where you rebuild the self you used to abandon. And once she rebuilds it, she makes a choice that changes everything. She would rather be alone than be invisible in a relationship. Invisible means you're there, but you're not seen. You're heard, but you're not met. You're loved in words, but not in effort. So she commits to something that might sound simple, but is actually rare. She will not accept less than what allows her to stay whole. If love arrives, it must be a love that doesn't imprison, doesn't manipulate, doesn't make her smaller. And if it doesn't arrive yet, then she keeps growing without panic, without bitterness, with dignity. Because the Stoics never told us to chase what we can't control. They taught us to build what cannot be taken. Character, peace, self-respect. And when you live like that, you start realizing something that flips the entire narrative. Being single isn't the risk. The risk is abandoning yourself just to avoid silence. Now, if that truth landed in your chest, the next step is even deeper because we have to talk about the moment she crosses the threshold, when love stops being a need and becomes a choice. Here's a line that will make some people uncomfortable because it exposes the truth in seconds. The moment a woman stops fearing abandonment, she becomes impossible to manipulate. And that's why her transformation feels dangerous to those who benefit from her silence. Because she's not looking for love that tightens around her throat. She's looking for love that lets her breathe. A relationship that supports her growth instead of shrinking her spirit. She refuses to be half of anything. Half truths, half effort, half commitment, half respect. And the world notices. Not because she's loud, but because she's clear. Most people don't fear strong women. They fear women who require emotional responsibility. Because emotional responsibility demands something rare. Honesty, consistency, maturity. And that's exactly what exposes the most common form of love. Today, love built on lack. A lot of relationships aren't formed from wholeness. They're formed from hunger. Hunger for validation, hunger for control, hunger to be chosen so you don't have to face yourself. Stoicism would call that attachment to what you cannot own. And it always creates suffering. Because when love is driven by fear, it turns into possession. It turns into negotiation. It turns into a quiet prison disguised as romance. She doesn't want that. And the proof is in her no. Every time she says no, it isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. It's a boundary placed with clean hands. She no longer begs for what should be freely given. No more convincing, no more over-explaining, no more pleading for presents like it's a favor. Because she discovered the Stoic shift. Your dignity is not up for discussion. Marcus Aurelius wrote about standing guard at the gates of the mind, only allowing in what aligns with virtue and truth. She does the same with her heart now. And that inner certainty changes everything. Not overnight, not with a dramatic speech, but with a break, a clean break that finally releases her. Sometimes the most merciful thing that can happen is a collapse. Because collapse ends the performance. It ends the pretending. And it forces you to see what was always there. You were surviving, not living. Jung had a powerful image for this. The tree that would grow to heaven must send its roots down to hell. And that's exactly what she did. She went down, not just into one relationship, into a pattern, into a family story, into inherited fear, into emotional scripts passed down like unfinished letters. Stay, even when it hurts. Prove your worth. Keep the peace. Don't be too much. And she faced what many people spend a lifetime avoiding. The pain beneath the pain. That's individuation, not becoming perfect, becoming real. It's the moment you stop living from your wounds and start living from your values. Stoicism calls it choosing virtue over impulse. Jung calls it integrating the shadow. Either way, it's the same awakening. You stop letting your unconscious drive the wheel. So she breaks the cycle. She says no to toxic scripts. She stops confusing intensity with intimacy. She stops thinking it's her job to heal someone who refuses to heal themselves. She understands something simple but life-changing. Compassion is not a contract. You can care and still walk away. That's what strength looks like when it's human, not hardened. And now she has new filters. She can tell the difference between presence and performance, between effort and theatrics, between love that's steady and love that's loud. Her intuition becomes sharper because she stopped ignoring it. Her energy becomes the gatekeeper. Not in a cold way, just in a wise way. She opens her heart, but only to truth, only to what doesn't violate her inner peace. That's why she feels like an archetype now, something older than trends, older than the modern dating chaos, the woman who belongs to herself. Not because she hates love, because she respects it. She refuses to turn connection into a battlefield. She refuses to be managed, molded, or minimized to fit someone else's comfort. She is no longer living to fit in. She is living to expand. And that is the real disruption. Because when she stops waiting to be chosen, she becomes the chooser. She writes her own story. She becomes emotionally sovereign, calm, grounded, and awake. So if you're watching this and you feel the weight of that truth, ask yourself one honest question. What cycle in your life keeps repeating because you keep calling it love? Because the real rebirth isn't when someone finally chooses you. It's when you finally choose yourself without guilt. And once that happens, the next step is inevitable. She crosses a threshold where love stops being survival and becomes celebration. Let's start with a sentence that cuts through years of confusion in under 8 seconds. The healthiest love begins the day you stop needing love to feel worthy. That's the threshold. Not the moment someone finally texts back, not the moment you find the right person, but the moment you look in the mirror and realize, I can stand on my own feet now. I can breathe without being chosen. I can be whole without being held. And when a woman reaches that point, something changes in her presence. It becomes quieter, but heavier, calm, but undeniable. Jung once warned that what you don't face within yourself becomes your fate, but she did face it. She met her fear, her longing, her old patterns, and instead of being ruled by them, she integrated them. That's why she no longer lived like a character begging for a role. She becomes the author. Stoicism calls this the inner fortress, an independence that can't be negotiated away. Marcus Aurelius would say, you don't hand the steering wheel of your life to someone else's mood. You don't outsource your peace. And once she learns that, she carries a rule that changes how she loves. Presence is not something you beg for. Presence is something you invite. If someone can't show up with truth, real effort, real integrity, then she doesn't punish them. She simply declines. Quietly, respectfully. Like closing a door that was never meant to be open. And here's the part people misunderstand. She still wants love. She still wants to be chosen, to be touched, to be seen in a way that softens the day. She isn't stone. She isn't detached. She's human. But she refuses to disappear inside romance. She refuses the old deal. I'll make myself smaller so you'll stay. She refuses the old bargain. I'll tolerate imbalance so I won't be alone. Because she has crossed into a different kind of adulthood, the kind Stoics trained for. They didn't teach emotional coldness. They taught emotional clarity. Love becomes healthier when it's aligned with virtue, honesty, respect, courage, self-control. So the love she's open to now isn't a rescue mission. It's a soul alliance. Two people who don't dominate and don't submit. Two people who can disagree without destroying. Two people who grow side by side without erasing each other's color. And because she knows what shallow love costs, she would rather wait than live on crumbs. That waiting isn't loneliness. It's refinement. It's the decision to trade surface level attention for something deeper. Character, consistency, safety. A partner who doesn't confuse control with care. Because she's learned something quietly brutal. A relationship can be the loneliest place on earth if you're constantly proving your worth. So she no longer screams to be understood. She doesn't fight for basic respect. She doesn't perform her value. Her presence speaks before her words do. You can feel it in the way she pauses before answering, in the way she doesn't rush to explain, in the way her boundaries are calm instead of sharp. And the truth is, energy shifts around someone like that. Not because she's intimidating, but because she's integrated. Jung would call it wholeness, the union of opposites. Softness with strength, openness with discernment, warmth with standards. That's why she won't accept an unbalanced connection. Not because she's trying to win, but because she knows what losing looks like. Losing yourself, slowly, one compromise at a time. She wants love that does not become a prison disguised as protection. She wants partnership that expands her life, not a cage dressed up as devotion. And this is where the world gets nervous. Because a woman who doesn't need to be chosen can't be managed by fear. She doesn't bend to keep someone comfortable. She doesn't reshape herself to fit a story that makes her smaller. She breaks an unspoken contract society depends on. The belief that a woman's value rises only when someone stands beside her. When she breaks that contract, she doesn't just change her life, she becomes an example. And for the system, an example is dangerous because it gives other people permission to wake up. So love, in her new world isn't salvation. It's celebration. It doesn't come to fill a hole. It comes to share and overflow. That is individuation, becoming yourself without the mask, without the bargain, without the quiet self-betrayal. And the strongest truth about a person like this is simple. She doesn't close doors out of bitterness. She closes them out of loyalty to her soul. So let me ask you a final question that might stay with you longer than this video. What if the love you've been chasing isn't missing because you're unworthy, but because your life is trying to teach you how to stop abandoning yourself first? And once you see that, you don't just want to watch this again, you start rewriting your own story. And that's exactly what we'll step into next. Let me close this with a truth that doesn't just sound good, it changes the way you live, starting tonight. You were never meant to spend your life searching for someone. You were meant to stop losing yourself. Because that's the real tragedy most people don't talk about. It isn't being single. It isn't being alone. It's the slow, invisible disappearance that happens when you keep choosing connection at the cost of your own spirit. And if you felt that before, if you've ever tried to earn love, tried to prove your worth, after tried to stay calm while your heart was constantly bracing for the next disappointment, then you already know what this message is pointing to. This journey was never about finding a person. It was about finding your way back. Back to your voice, back to your boundaries. Back to that quiet part of you that used to whisper, "This isn't right." The part you silenced because you were afraid of being left. But here's the shift that changes everything. When you stop acting from lack, you start living from choice. Lack makes you rush. Lack makes you tolerate crumbs. Lack makes you accept mixed signals and call it complicated. But choice? Choice makes you steady. Choice lets you wait without panic. Choice lets you walk away without hatred. Choice lets you close a door without slamming it. That's what loyalty to your soul really means. It doesn't mean you hate love. It means you won't betray yourself to keep it. And that's why a woman who reaches this place becomes a symbol, not a symbol of coldness, but of emotional freedom. She shows what happens when someone stops living to impress, stops living to prove, stops living to be picked. She reminds us of something the Stoics knew thousands of years ago. Peace is not a gift someone gives you. It's a practice you build. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait for life to get easier. He trained his mind to be steady inside the storm. And that's exactly what this woman did in her own way. She trained her inner world until she no longer needed the outside world to validate her. So now she moves differently. She doesn't hurry. She doesn't fear silence. She doesn't chase what cannot be controlled. She builds her life like a home, slow, honest, grounded. And that's the part I want you to hear clearly. You can rebuild your life without rushing, without being afraid, without proving anything to anyone. You don't have to convince the right person. You don't have to audition for love. You don't have to keep shrinking yourself so someone else feels secure. You can stop, you can breathe, you can return to yourself. Now, if this story touched something in you, if it felt less like content and more like a mirror, there's a reason for that. It might be a sign that you're ready for a different kind of love. A love that begins with peace instead of panic. A love that starts with reconciliation, making peace with who you are, what you've survived, and what you will never accept again. Because the strongest relationships aren't built on desperation. They're built on two people who can stand alone and still choose each other. And maybe, just maybe, that's the love your life has been preparing you for. So I want to ask you one question, and I want you to answer it honestly in the comments. What is one boundary you wish you had honored sooner? Not to blame yourself, not to relive pain, but to mark the moment you stopped abandoning your own soul. And if you know a woman, your sister, your mother, your friend, even a younger version of you who needs this reminder, share this video with her. Not because she's broken, because she deserves to remember her strength. Now, before you scroll away, do one thing with intention. If this message reached you, like the video so it reaches someone else. If you've lived this lesson, comment so you don't walk through it alone. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe, not on impulse, but by choice. Because when something speaks to your soul, don't let it die in silence. Let it echo. And the final thought I'll leave you with is simple, but it can rewrite your entire life. The right love won't ask you to disappear. It will meet you where you are whole. Hold on to that, and when you're ready, we'll go deeper in the next video.